Hi Zoe, welcome to the Fertility Podcast.
Hello, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so lovely to see you and to see you looking radiant and absolutely beautiful after not long ago having a little boy.
2 weeks.
2
2 weeks.
weeks. Oh my God. To be honest, I half expected you to message me and say, Kate, can we possibly rearrange? I'm all a bit in baby fog right
No,
now.
I'm hoping the baby brain's not going to let me down. I've got some notes.
Oh no, I'm sure it won't. I'm sure it won't. But thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, we've chatted a fair bit over the last few
We
months,
have.
really, and and the reason why I wanted to have you as a guest on the podcast is that your story is inspirational. You've not ever stood back and taken no for an answer, and you are the absolute image of the person that I try to empower my patients to be, that person who's able to advocate for themselves and not take no for an answer and literally take ownership of their fertility journey. So why I wanted to chat with you is for you to have the opportunity to talk about your story, talk about the things that you did, and in the hope that then we can empower other women to really feel that they can also advocate for themselves and to feel empowered on their fertility
Yeah,
journey.
thank you. I feel I've become a gynecologist over the last 4 years with the amount of reading I've done. But yeah, that's totally where I've aimed for, to be empowered and to take
Yeah.
ownership.
Yeah, and I always talk about the fact that you actually do have to become your own fertility advocate because sadly, nobody else is going to do that for you. So it's something that you have to learn and the crucial things are immersing yourself with as much information, but most importantly, the right type of information, not Dr. Google, and then helping you to make then the right decisions.
Absolutely.
But before we kind of come to that and how you kind of went on this quest to become empowered and knowledgeable, tell us a little bit about your fertility journey and kind of where it started up to where you are now, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So when I was 15, I was diagnosed with childhood cancer, which was lymphoma. The diagnosis took nearly a year to make, really. I was fobbed off by a GP and stuff when I said I'd got this huge lump. And, I was walking around like the elephant lady with a massive lump in my neck before they took me seriously. And because also it's a criteria that you tend to be like a 60-year-old man that's smoked and drunk all their life. So for a 15-year-old healthy girl, it wasn't really the norm. They didn't overly know how to treat me, so they just blasted me with chemo with a load of quite hard drugs that they don't use nowadays. I mean, obviously it changed, it saved my life and stuff, but that resulted in me becoming infertile. I then had a second lot of cancer when I was 18, where I was put on experimental treatment. I was one of about 4 in the world, I think. So I was sent to like professors, and the biopsy slides were sent across Europe and stuff because I was quite an unusual case. And so they put me on experimental treatment, which further confirmed my infertility, really. I do consider myself very lucky with that because I was given the option of, do you want to live and be infertile or do you want to die? Which for me was a really easy option. And also that gave me many, many years to get my head round the infertility. So when I met my now husband, I think it was like day 1 or something, where I literally said, oh, if you're looking for a womb, I'm not going to be able to provide, well, I can provide a womb, but I can't provide any eggs to go in it. And he kind
Wow.
of ran to his mum and said, what do I do with this? I don't think there's a bigger turn off for a bloke. And his mum, thankfully, just said, she's obviously very genuine. And I think it's really important to have that discussion early doors. And I think that's what's helped us stay strong and stuff, the openness. And that's why I do consider myself very lucky, because I was able to do that. And it's not been, many years of trying as such. So
I mean, that must be so difficult to know when to start having those conversations in a relationship.
yeah,
Because, like you say, that could send somebody running for the hills, or not. I suppose you just don't know, do you, how they're going to take it?
no, absolutely. And equally, I was so lucky with my husband because he'd worked in schools a lot, and obviously seen less fortunate children, and so he was actually a really big candidate for adoption. He said, do you know what, I've always wanted to adopt anyway. And I said, well, please can we try this, because I'd really like to be pregnant and carry a baby. I hadn't quite got to the headspace for adoption yet. I hadn't ruled it out, but I hadn't quite got there yet. And so we had that discussion, and you know, it's been a journey we've done together. Luckily, as he'll never miss of telling me, he's grade A, and you know, he's got zero problems. He's been through every test there is, and he's absolutely wonderful. So, you know, he got 2 thumbs up from the doctor, which he was delighted about after providing his sample. And so, you know, he's been absolutely fine, which has probably helped our journey a lot. But equally, I think humour's helped it. You know, there's a book. I think the lady was on one of the podcasts previously, actually, an American lady that ended up having triplets, and she wrote this book called Laughing's Conceivable or something, and really like small book, but they basically, her and her partner used to play like waiting room bingo and things like that of what they saw. And I do think you have to find the humour in these things, definitely.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I always talk about, you know, putting the joy back into your life. So it's not all consuming about trying to conceive and the fertility side of it. And often it's quite difficult to see the humor in it and to find things when you're anxious and worried. But it's so important if you can do that. And I love the idea of waiting room bingo.
Yeah. I think they did like waiting room bingo or the Olympics or something, and they like gave people, you know, characters and medals for what they'd done and everything. So yeah, however you can find it, really.
Absolutely. So then tell us then, kind of, you obviously decided that that's the route you wanted to go down. So what happened then?
Yeah, so I was kind of clear that it was donor eggs. When we first got together, or like, you know, a few years after, we went to see a UK fertility consultant quite early. We weren't ready to have children there, but I just wanted to know if there's anything I should be doing proactively, you know, over the next year or so. He turned around and said, I can have you pregnant in 6 weeks, to which we were like, oh, we're not ready yet. No worries. And he scanned me and he said, yeah, there's absolutely nothing in your ovaries. So donor eggs is the route you should go down. So he recommended either Spain or Cyprus. I wanted an anonymous donor, and the anonymity laws are different in Spain and Cyprus. And also, I think the donors are more plentiful over there compared to the UK. I do believe the treatment's very different. And so I opted for Spain. I've spent a lot of time in Spain as a youngster. I kind of can get by in the language and stuff, so I was very comfortable there. And as the Spanish...
So it seemed very right for you then as a choice.
Yeah, and as the Spanish doctors pointed out, they were like, you're not going to be hard to match to a Spanish person, are you? And I was like, no, shouldn't be. So we chose Spain, and I went for, when we were then ready, we went back to the English consultant and said to him, like, you know, we'd like to start the process. And I always remember leaving his office for like the final time before I was going to go to Spain. And he shook my hands and he said, well, I'll next see you for a scan. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, thank you. And in my mind then, like, if I can take myself back, I was just so sure it was going to be like going to the supermarket and buying a product, or, you know, just collecting something. I mean, I thought, oh, okay, cool, here we go. We're going to fly to Spain, get the embryo popped in, pregnancy, it'll be born at this time, cool. And that was it. And when it first didn't work, like, you really could have knocked me over with a feather. I was so shocked it was untrue, so shocked.
And I think there's that perception, isn't there, Zoe, that IVF will fix it.
Yeah.
And I think there's also the perception that you'll have a cycle of IVF and it'll work. The first cycle will work.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so important to view IVF as a course of treatment, and that you go into it not expecting necessarily the first time to work, but for your body to understand more about what's going on, for your doctors to learn more from you, that then in subsequent cycles, your success rates are going to go up. And I really feel that's important to get across, that the longer we feel that IVF first cycle is going to be the the start of this new creation, this new life, then that potentially is dangerous and harming to our emotional health.
Yeah.
Whereas to view it as a course is probably a healthier way to view it.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my mum this morning and like, you know, about what we're going to discuss, and I just said if I'd have known then what I know now, like, wow, how different it would have been. And as I say, it was such a shock for me. It was just the biggest. I really didn't even conceive it could happen, especially with donor eggs. You know, great sperm. You know, I was considered a banker. From my consultant, you know, I was fit, I was healthy, my BMI is fine, I don't smoke, I've never smoked, I don't drink, I've never done drugs, you know, literally the only problem is I'd got no eggs. That was the only problem. So you get an egg, you stick it in, job's a good one as far as they were concerned. And
Yeah.
they really were sure of this, but no, that didn't work.
So then you went on and you had, well, how many rounds of IVF did you end up having in the end?
So the total to get to the 2 babies that we've got now is 11 embryos, basically. So what happened was the first one didn't work, the second one didn't work either, and then on the third one they put 2 embryos in. One was a mosaic though, but then that didn't work. We then took loads of you know, we were looking at the books and seeing what we could do differently. We did the EMAS test, the ALICE test, the hysteroscopy, the biopsy, everything we could do. They couldn't find anything at all. And so we got a new donor. And this is something that is maybe worth noting, that the difference between the Spanish and the English is quite marked. And I'm used to the Spanish because, as I say, I've spent a lot of time over there and I understand them. My husband, not so much. And so we got this new donor. There wasn't a huge amount of embryos, and we were at Liverpool ready to board the plane. We were literally on the bottom of the steps. And I said to my husband, I said, oh, my phone's vibrating, and got it out. And I said, oh, it's Spain. And I said, we'll be there in a couple of hours. And he said, no, get it. And so I said, oh, okay. So I answered it, and it was a receptionist from Spain. And she said, hello, all the embryos are dead, so please cancel your plane. And
Oh my
I
goodness.
was like, okay. And I don't know whether she thought we'd hired a jet, which obviously we hadn't. The plane wasn't going to be cancelled. So I kind of turned to my husband and said, what do you want to do? And he was like, there's no point in going. We were only going for a short overnight anyway. And we had to like be escorted back through the airport, like some naughty children that had been chucked off a flight. And we got interviewed and they said, you know, why aren't you getting on the plane? And my husband was like, you know, red. And I just went, oh, the meeting's been cancelled, thank you, and just marched on through, because I just thought, you've got to put your game face on and carry on back. And we just got back, and I was just like, I can't even believe this has happened.
So when you say the difference between the Spanish and the English, you mean like the culture and kind of the way that they say things, that perhaps not giving a notice?
Yeah,
is that what you mean?
Absolutely. And I think that really has to be taken into account. I'm on a group, several groups on Facebook, and you see people like saying, you know, the Spanish aren't replying quick enough, they're not responding to my emails, they've said this, they've said that. And in truth, none of it's personal. It's literally just their culture. And I think one of the things is to get on board with that culture. I know after we'd had our first child and we were going for the second one, the consultant who I adore, you know, I can't say a bad word about him. One of the things he did say was, if I were you, I'd save your money and take your daughter to Disneyland, because, you know, it's tough. And
how many times have I heard that? I've heard it so many times.
Yeah, and I think you've got to not take no notice of these things, because obviously it's very difficult to do, but you've got to really put them in a bucket and go, that's just the way they are. They don't mean any malice by it.
So when we have chatted before, one of the things that you struck me and that I wrote down was not yielding to the
Yeah.
doctors. So tell us a bit more about what you mean by that and how you didn't yield to the doctors.
Yeah, of course. So I don't know whether it is an unusual situation or not, but I had the situation where I had a UK consultant and a Spanish consultant, and they had different.
That's quite normal.
Yeah, they had different views on things, and so after like the first embryo didn't work, the UK consultant was saying, "Oh, put yourself on steroids." And then the Spanish consultant was like, "Oh, no, it doesn't need steroids. It can just carry on." And then the UK consultant was saying, "We've had really good results using Lubion instead of Cyclogest, which is obviously an injectable progesterone instead of a pessary." Whereas the Spanish one was going, "There's no published papers about it. There's no medical evidence." And I think a lot of the time you have to read, and then figure it out for yourself. So you've got to go, well, am I going to feel more confident? Is it going to do me any harm? Is it going to do the baby any harm? And you've really got to take a punt on it. So one of the things that I looked at but didn't do was like the IVIG and the interlipids and things like that. And I spoke to both consultants and they just said, look, the evidence isn't there. We've maybe tried it once, or it's very expensive, or you need to be careful now you're a mother because this could happen. And I think you have to have a really open and honest conversation with your consultants, and you need to be armed with all of the evidence, all of your beliefs as to why it should work. You need to have a hugely open mind and not take things to heart if they do say no. I do think a lot of this is mental as well. I mean, I've tried psychologists and hypnotists and things like that. I've tried all of these things, acupuncture, the whole lot. So lots of holistic things as well. But I do think one of the things that is really key is that you're going into this in your best belief. You believe that this is the right treatment for you. If you go into it thinking, well, they've not listened to me about these drugs or this medication or whatever, then you're going into it with a negative mindset and you're going into it with doubts.
That's such good advice, Zoe. It really is, and I think it's all about taking that responsibility to fight for what you want and doing the research to back it up. And when you mentioned about IVF add-ons, and you're absolutely correct in what you're saying, that there's not always the evidence to necessarily show that they're effective. But if it's something that you feel you want to try, it's important to have that open and honest conversation with your consultant about what is the evidence. And it might be that there isn't evidence, but they might have local evidence from their clinic that they may be able to share with you. But also, most importantly, what are the risks associated? And only then can you make an informed decision. Whether or not you accept those IVF add-ons, that's completely down to the two of you as a couple. But actually having that open and honest conversation and asking about the benefits versus the risks can only help you in making decisions. It's so important.
Yeah, and I did feel a pressure, especially at the beginning, from the Spanish team, that what they know works, and to actually just carry on like this and to just keep going and keep going. But my the mathematician and the logistical brain that I've got, I was like, no way, because it's it's the definition of insanity, isn't it? Just trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Get the same result.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I was determined to try different things. And at one stage I was recommended to go and see a Chinese doctor who gave me herbs and things like this, a whole method of Chinese herbs. She's had wonderful results with various fertility patients. And but you have to be realistic about this thing. Is there going to be evidence for Chinese herbs? No, because no clinical trials will be done. No pharma company is going to back a herbal treatment because that's not going to line their pockets. And they're the ones that do the clinical trials. They're the ones that gets the results. And I think one of the really, I mean, I work in healthcare anyway, so I'm probably more exposed to these things. But I think one of the really key things to know is you're never going to get solid evidence. I mean, you as as a patient, are you going to put yourself forward for experimental treatments that could, potentially harm you or your baby or stuff? Because I won't even take paracetamol when I'm pregnant. So, there's no evidence of anything, and also it's classed like they can't do clinical trials on pregnant ladies.
No, it's unethical. It's so difficult, isn't it? Because it's getting that balance. If you think that back in 44 years or so ago, when Louise Brown was the first test tube baby born, right? That was experimental. IVF was experimental. A lot of IVF to this day is experimental. And without that ability to experiment, we would never be where we are now when it comes to fertility treatments. We've advanced so much in 44. And apologies, Louise, if I'm adding any extra years onto you. Maybe that's about right, I think. But had we not taken the ability within medicine to try these things, we would not be where we are. So it is all about getting that balance, just making that decision for yourself, knowing the risks, and not wanting, as you say, to do anything that's going to be harmful to you or to potentially your baby going forward. It's a really hard to navigate that, isn't it?
It's really hard, and especially when you're dealing with such intelligent, successful consultants that have made it to the top of the game. They know so much. Like, I'm sure they've forgotten more than I'll ever know, but I do think that there's a huge onus to take control on yourself. So I read your favorite book. It starts with the egg.
Which, can I just put a little caveat on? It's not my favourite book.
And, took it with a huge pinch of salt at the end of the day. There were some things that were just absolutely impossible to do, but there were some things that I thought, do you know what, I can get on board with that. And it was really simple, like getting a metal water bottle over a plastic one. And I know that sounds really, really silly, but I drink filtered water through a metal bottle. Has that helped me get pregnant? Not sure. But do you know what? It made me feel like I was doing something. It made me...
You're doing something.
Yeah.
You're taking control. You're feeling empowered. You're advocating for yourself. You're doing all those things. I always feel that it's not one piece of the missing puzzle, but there's lots of different pieces that have to be slotted in the right way to make a success. And if that means that you're looking at toxins in your home and what you are putting into your body or putting onto your skin, that's one piece of the puzzle that's so important.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. It's just those little things. I think the reason why I fight, a bit like you said, with it starts with the egg, there's some really good advice in there, but there's also too much and it's too overwhelming, and I don't think it's right for everybody to do all of those things. But cherry picking, I think it's so important. I always say to people, actually, even when they come and I see them from consultation, I'm going to be telling you things. Some of those things might be different to what your acupuncturist is saying, but you cherry pick what you need from all of us.
Yeah, you've got to do what's right for you. And as I say, like, I changed my shampoo and deodorant. Did this make a difference? Who knows? Was it going to harm me? No. And it was fine. And those kind of things, I think, are going to empower you and make you feel as though you're doing something. Because I think a lot of this journey is the helplessness, the sitting, the waiting, the just feeling like you can't make any changes. Whereas you really can. And I before this second pregnancy, I ate the same thing every day for 9 months. Can't touch the stuff now, but I ate.
What was it?
So I had a tray which I put into the oven, so it was roasted because warming's meant to be better rather than eating it of a salad. And it was tomatoes, so red for your blood, red peppers for your blood, beetroot for your blood, sauerkraut for the gut health, avocado and fish. And I ate that every day for lunch, every single day for lunch. And as I say,
wonder you can't touch it now.
No wonder I can't. And a bit of kefir and kimchi thrown in now and then. And I change my supplements. So I was taking things like royal jelly and things like that. And as I say, it's a huge balance of are they going to harm you? Are they going to make you pregnant? Probably not, if I'm really honest. And
No.
is the consultant going to advise this to you? No, of course they're not, because they've not got a paper in
No.
front of them that tells you, to put CoQ10 into the supplement regime, and that will 100% make you pregnant. Of course it won't. And as I say, you've not got the pharmaco's backing for supplements, so you're not going to have clinical trials on it. You're not going to have proof. But if they make you feel better, they make you feel empowered, you do believe in the science behind it, then really go for it and keep changing those things.
That's brilliant, Zoe. Thank you. Because, like I said at the beginning, it's all about feeling empowered and taking that responsibility to advocate for yourself. If there's one thing that you could say that you wish you'd known way back then that you now know, which you wish you could have done then to make a difference, what one thing would that be?
So one of the huge things in Spain that I didn't realise that I obviously do now is that once a donor, whether they're male or female, has produced 6 live births, they're then taken off the donor register and they're not allowed to donate anymore. Now, I believe in England, they protect a donor so that if they want to have further siblings, full siblings, they can do that. In Spain, they don't do that. So when it came to having a new donor for our second child, we weren't able to go back to the original donor, which, I've made peace with. I think it's fine. They're kind of 2/3 siblings rather than half siblings, because I do believe a lot in epigenetics, which is a whole new podcast, I'm sure.
I definitely do one on epigenetics.
Yes.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I do believe they're kind of more siblings. And as I say, the new baby looks identical to how the toddler looks. So it is good, but I do wish I'd known that. And a lot of the things, especially in Spain, it's assumed knowledge. They go, oh, well, yes, this happens. Didn't you know? Well, no, I didn't, Spain. I didn't know that because no one told me. And, so that's one of the things that I think you need to be really careful of. And as I say, just don't go into it blindly thinking you're going to the shop and just picking something up. Because if I knew now, the drugs I've introduced, the changes I've made, everything, whether they would have made the difference, I don't know. But as I say, when I went into the sibling round, I thought, oh, I've done this once. This is fine. I'll just follow the same protocol and, here we go. Well, no, it wasn't. Your body's changed. I started after my first baby, I started getting huge skin reactions. I've never had skin reactions in my life. Your hormones are changing, your body's depleted. You really have to treat every single one as a brand new pregnancy. And you have to look at, especially things like thyroxine. That's, a really controversial one, because the GPs won't give you thyroxine if your TSH isn't above 5. However, it needs to be 2 or below, ideally, for pregnancy. So that's another one. But is there any evidence? Not huge evidence. It's one of them.
Thank you, Zoe. That has been amazing. I'm absolutely sure that people are going to feel massively empowered and really want to take on that responsibility and their ownership for their fertility journey after listening to you. So thank you so much. And thank you for being a guest on the Fertility Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.